right, it looks like we are getting live right now. Hey everyone, how's it going? Say a nice good day, mates, to all my friends down in Australia. It's so great to be here with all of you. As you can see, I like to get started and like just get right into the hair. No, I'm kidding. I'm trying to I'm trying to save you the pain and agony of having to watch me put a root color on because that's not fun for anyone. So let's just get that last little bit on there and let's get the ball rolling. How's everyone doing? I am Ricardo Santiago. I'm Joico's global brand education expert. Very excited to be here with you. This is a very special and unique live that we're doing, especially for our friends in Australia. So I'm truly honored to be here and be a part of this to share with all of you. I would love to hear where everyone's from. I don't know a ton about Australia's geography, but I know we always get people from around the world. It's kind of exciting to think that I'm talking to the future right now because you guys are literally like a day ahead of us right now. So that's cool. And we're just got a lot of stuff that we're going to go over today. This is going to be a lot of fun with this live. I hope that you all enjoy it. I know this is a new spin on a technique that I actually have done before, but we are changing it up a little bit, right? So the first time that we did this technique, we were talking all about LumiShine and how to properly use that, and we were introducing some new shades with that. But this time, we're going back to the roots, right? And when I say the roots, I mean my roots with Joico, which is Vero K-PAK Color. It's still like my bread and butter. I love Vero K-PAK Color. For me, there is no other line that can match that as far as a true tone color line is concerned. And I get a lot of questions, especially on Instagram, from people that say, you know, I'm just starting out on my own. What should I go with? Should I do Vero K-PAK? Should I do LumiShine? And to be honest, I usually just tell them, you know, it depends on A, how much of a budget you have, because if you have it, get them both. And B, how much do you customize your formulas? Because Vero K-PAK is all about customizing, right? When we're talking about true tone colors, we're talking about creating something that's really unique for your individual client, right? So every time that they come in, they're going to get something that's specially done by you, specially formulated by you, that they're not going to be able to get replicated somewhere else. And that's what, for me, is my favorite part about Vero K-PAK Color. Now, before we get started and going right into the technique, we'll cover a few little ground rules and bases here. We've got the wizard behind the curtain is Brandon. He's helping us out. You'll see a lot of different things popping up on the screen with our formulas and things like that. That's him. He's handling all that stuff. If you have questions, please make sure that you ask. He will be randomly pulling some up and putting them on the stage. And then the other wizard behind the phone is my wife, Angela, who she's helping out as well. And she'll be reading out the questions to me. So if you have anything to ask, please feel free to ask along. I promise I'll do my best to answer. And if I don't know what the answer is, I promise I'll Google it and then give you the answer later. So we'll get you all the information that you need. All right. Now, let's go over really quick our formulations before we jump into the hair, because that's always the first thing that we get asked. And I know Brandon's going to pop those right up there, but I kind of lined them up right there for everyone, nice and neat. So we've got our base formula. What we've got are 4 different formulations that we're working with. We have a highlight formula that we're using our Vero K-PAK Cream Lightener. And then we are going with a base formula, which is nice and deep, 4N4A with 10 volume. We're using 5N5G as like a low light formula with 20 volume. And then our mid light formula, which is what I'm calling kind of like just that extra formulation that we're mixing in there, is 6B7N with 30 volume. So it's going to give us a lot of dimension. We're going to create some really unique kind of color palettes with that, because we're shifting our developers when we're using permanents, and we're also combining some cool tones with some warm tones and some kind of like in between cool and warm tones. So it's kind of, we're marrying them all together, right? When I was coming up with this technique, my inspiration behind it was when I would see the way that creamer would kind of go into coffee. I mean, we all know Australia's got some wonderful coffee, but I love the look of that, right? So I like how those tones kind of come together and they start swirling around. I wanted to create something like that. So we came up with this technique. I'm going to show you actually now what you can look forward to at the end here. This is actually a finished mannequin that we have of this technique. And she started very similar to this one did, just slightly deeper in tones. And this one was done using our Lumishine series. So we've got that nice deep root, and then you can see through the ends how we've got the combination of warm tones and cool tones mixed in there. Whereas most of the time people might say, oh, that's going to clash. You can't really combine those tones together. Here's a great example of how beautifully they mix together and how it really does work. And it looks beautiful straight or curled and waved. So there's just a good example and visual of that here. Now, you'll have to kind of bear with us as far as the lighting goes today. We're actually using our studio lights. Typically, when we're doing these lives, we've got daylight here. I've got some nice, huge open windows, but it's currently after 9 o'clock in my side of the world, and I know it's about, I think, 1 in the afternoon over there in Australia. So it's cool. It's a unique way to be doing these lives. Now, I'm going to jump right into the technique here now. Let's talk first about the sectioning, right? So it's really pretty simple. We're going to go 1/2 of the head, and then I'm going to execute on the other half of the head. So here's our sectioning that we've created for this. Right, so first thing that we're going to do, we're going to take a center radial part that goes from the middle front, and it goes straight down all the way back. And then from that, you're going to take all of your partings from that center radial and then go down to your reference points along the perimeter. So it's just an easier way to be able to do that kind of to get your sectioning and to keep it cohesive, right? So the first one we take is basically like if you were cutting a fringe, you're going to take a triangle section here, right? And then you will clip that away. Then we're going to take a second where we're going to go from about halfway up that parting, and we're going to go diagonal back down, almost to a vertical, to right in front of the ear. All right, and then next, we're going to go from just kind of right at the drop of the crown as it's starting to bend down here. From that point, we're going to come over to the top of the ear there, and then we'll go horizontally across from just behind the ear to the occipital, and then one final diagonal back where we're going from behind the ear down to the center point of that nape, right? So everything we're going to do, we're just kind of start here, diagonal across, come across here, and then take that diagonal there. And that's how the sectioning should look when it's done. Same with all the little Zulu knots and everything. It should look exactly like this when you're doing it in the salon. No, I'm kidding. Don't. That'll take way too much time. But your clients would be impressed if you did do that. So I've started already by getting the base formula on, and now we're going to go straight into the sectioning and get our application done. Now, when we're doing this application, it's totally up to you. You can start in the front and work to the back, or you can start in the back and work to the front. It works the same way, no matter which direction you decide to go. And so we've got that first one, then we're going to come again, kind of like that center point. You're going to go down to just in front of that ear. There we go. And then we're going from right about just below that crown to the back point of the ear there. And this technique works great whether you are creating lift with, let's say your client is a virgin application, she doesn't have any color in the hair, this would work really well for that. Or if you're deepening it, it again will still work just as great in that situation as well. Maybe you kind of want to mix it up and you want to go with chrome instead of permanent. But I find that when you're using and kind of shifting those developers, it creates a really cool kind of iridescent technique iridescent result between the colors. So you're creating a little bit more shift between them as well, right? So then we're going to come straight across here from the occipital right to behind that ear there, right? Just kind of get these pushed over here out of the way. And then last but not least, this lower back section here. All right. Okay, so that's it. Now we're ready to go ahead and start. As you can tell, I actually have the mannequin head just slightly damp. For me, I actually, when I'm melting, and if you've seen any of my lives before, you know I love to melt colors. I melt all day long. But for that, it makes it a little easier to create some slip and also to make a more fluid transition between the colors, right? Particularly when we're talking about going from a very deep base formula to something that could be a little bit lighter, right? So what's great about this is as we're working through this technique, it's a lot of doing the same, right? So we're just repeating a lot of the same steps, and it's actually very easy to do using very few foils, right? We have a question?
Yep, we have a question.
All right.
The question is, do you feather the base application or just bring it out to the same length of retouch?
So that's a great question. What I did was I stretched it about an inch, okay? So if you want it to have what you'll find is that because we're melting these colors together, it's going to blur that line out. So if you wanted to feather it, you absolutely can, and that would definitely work. And it would diffuse your line a little bit more. Or if you wanted to, just keep your base formula on hand and just kind of give it another little tap to resaturate and rehydrate that point as you're melting those colors together. That way you can stretch and pull it a little bit further as well. I like to say when you're melting the colors, you really want to be able to see an identifiable difference between your formula A and your formula B. You should almost create like this formula C in the middle where the band of transition happens and you're creating a third color right there. But that's a great question. Thank you for asking. Okay. I waited to mix my colors together because I didn't want them to oxidize. So this is our low light formula. This is my mid light formula. I'm using color coded bowls so I know which one is which. I don't want to make the mistake of mixing these up. So it wouldn't make a huge difference, but still, we're just changing the way that they would be placed into the hair. With every section that we do, we're going to start with our highlight formula first. And then we're also, before we start doing anything, we always want to prep the hair properly too. So we're going to use, if you are not familiar with, our Defy Damage Pro Series 1, which is an absolute lifesaver in the salon. This is a bond protecting, bond building, bond strengthening, bond optimizing spray. So covers all the bond bases. If you, just covers all the bond bases. That's actually, that's new. I haven't used that one yet. So what you want to do is you want to use this in short bursts and work it down the length of the hair. So I've already prepped her with it first, but make sure that before your application, you always give it a really good shake because all those little molecules need to be mixed up together. And once you give it a shake, then you'll take that section and just short bursts. That's it. Just a few sprays down, work your way through, and then once you've finished, then you can either comb through it. I personally like to use a boar bristle brush because I feel like that really distributes the product a lot more evenly into the hair.
And this is a great time too. If you're watching this and you know somebody else who might enjoy it, please go ahead and share it. You can do that right while you're watching along with us.
Yeah, so I also found too that with this sectioning, right, and this technique, you can definitely use this, replicate it, change it around if you wanted to, tweak your formulas. Maybe instead of 3 different color formulas and a lightning formula, you only do 2, or you can do this in a different format where you're using maybe reds or focusing on all warm tones. It'll definitely work in a variety of ways. This technique in particular, the way that I'm doing it here with these particular colors, was specifically created because I wanted to fuse those warm and cool tones together, specifically in the BREWnette family. So that's why we're doing it this way.
We have a question coming in. The question is, if you alternate using chrome, will the color be affected if it touches the permanent color at the roots?
So I would not combine permanent and chrome together. What you would find is that you can definitely combine our Vero K-PAK Color with, let's say, Age Defy within Vero K-PAK as well. Those intermix well, but you don't necessarily want to do that with Chrome because the technologies are a little different. If you notice, Chrome even has its own specific developer. It has an activator which works differently than the peroxide that you're going to use with Vero K-PAK Color. So for those reasons, I would keep them separate. What I would say is either choose to do all chrome or do all permanent, or in this case, we'll do all permanent, and then for our highlights afterwards, we can tone it later with chrome. So those are your options that you can do with that. Now, I'm going to start in the back section here, and the first thing that I want to do is we're going to take a deep zigzag point, right? So let me just rotate this to where we can see. How's that for the lighting? Is that better? Okay, perfect. So right here, what I want to do is incorporate both sides of the base. Don't worry about this. I'll wipe that off later. But we're going to take from the lower nape area on the bottom, and then we're also going to work on the side nape area here as well. So what you want to do is just take some points like this. And ideally, the best way to do that is really to just take the point of your comb straight in without lifting it. And what that does is it allows you to create cleaner lines without trying to work the weave into it as well. When you're trying to work that weave, you don't get those high and low points as clean. All right, so we'll do that. Just going to clip this away. And let's get our stuff over here. If you noticed before when I was mixing my cream lightener formula, it was actually very loose. I mixed it 1 to 2 parts, 1 part of the lightener to 2 parts developer. The reason I did that is because it tends to firm up quite a bit. So in a couple of minutes, you'll see how firm that actually will become. I'm going to step over here and we'll just, how's that? We're good there? Perfect. And again, keep the questions coming. If anyone has any questions, would love to hear it. And now what we're going to do is we're going to start first with the highlight here. I'm also using my artistry foils, which are fantastic for a technique like this because I can take nice big sections and work pretty quickly and easily through it. She's already light, so I'm using 10 volume, which we all know when it comes to a mannequin, it's probably not going to do a ton. This hair has already been processed quite a bit, so really what I'm doing this for is just to give it a little bit of a budge and then open up um, the hair to be able to absorb the toning formula a little bit better. Now for our base, what I want to do is now for here, we are going to churn and feather this in a little bit. We don't want to melt it into that lightener, but we do want to just kind of lightly feather it in. And it's okay if we see a little bit of that transition right there happen, because that's going to create kind of like this little buffed out blurred effect right there. Okay, so because we're using our cream lightener, what I'm going to do is fold this over twice. I don't want to run the risk of that lightener completely touching this point, so we'll just do this. And that's it. We can either leave it like that, or if you wanted to, just to
Hey, Ricardo, your sound cut out right now. Can you adjust your audio? We can't hear you right now. Not yet. Can't hear your sound.
Testing.
Yep, we can hear you now.
all
Great.
right.
Okay, good.
Cool. We just
Thank you
had to
so
go
much.
into the audio settings and adjust something there. All right, perfect. So thank you for that, Brandon. So now we're gonna go from what we want to do is I got the wrong formula. So we start with the highlight around the perimeters, and you're going to repeat this through all of them. So we're always starting with the highlight. Next, we're going to follow it up with what I'm calling our midlight, all right? Because I don't want to go and create such a high contrast that we're going from our our much brighter highlight straight into a deeper low light, right? Remember, our low light, we're doing a level 5. So I'm going to go with, this is kind of like that buffer formula right in the middle. And we'll start by kind of applying it through the mids and then work it down and through. I like to make sure that I get really good saturation, in particular when I'm combining two formulas that are more high contrast like this, right? So we'll make sure that we have this melted together really well by starting through the mids and ends and then transitioning our way up. So now, as I bring this formula up a little bit, I know that I've got great saturation and I'm set down here. And what I can do is just tap with my base formula again right at that root, stretch it down, make sure we have good saturation. And then this is how I like to melt those colors together is I will start with my index fingers here, dragging that formula down a little bit. And you can see where it's starting to already change that mid-light color right here, right? So you're seeing that really deep. It goes lighter and then lighter. So once we've got a little bit of a buildup of that color there, I'll switch my fingers and then finish dragging it the rest of the way down.
We have a question coming in. Someone asks, could you use powder lightener instead of cream?
You absolutely could. So if you wanted to use Verolight or something along those lines, you can definitely do that and use a powder lightener instead. For me in this situation, I like to use the cream just because if maybe let's say the application takes me a little bit, I know I have a little extra protection from like the shea butter and the proteins and all that stuff that are in there to protect the hair as well, right? So we grab our last section here, and then this is going to be our low light. So we do the same thing, not as cautious now, obviously, with the melting of the colors. I still would do it the exact same way. I don't change anything about the way that I apply it. What I do is just make sure that I have really good saturation, and then now I can go ahead and melt them together.
And another question is coming in. The question is, did you use a different brush to blend the section or for the blend section?
No, so I'm using the same brush that I used for my base, but what I did do is that because the base is already set, now where it's going on is it's allowing me to pull to it's okay if it's grabbing a little bit of the second formula because the second formula is a lighter formula. It's not really going to influence that base formula.
Great questions. Keep asking questions.
Yes, we love the questions. Keep them going. If not, it's just a lot of me standing and awkwardly talking. It makes it a lot more interactive. So we love the interaction. Now we're going to move into this next section here, and again, we're just repeating the same thing that we just did. Make sure I'm getting the right clip. Yep. And so I am going to, remember what I said before, right? I wanted to kind of layer the colors together in a specific way. So lightener, high or mid light, low light. So then I'm going back to my lightener here, which I know you might be thinking, oh, well, I thought that we didn't want the highlight to sit against the low light. That's more so when we're talking about our perimeter here. So really where you're going to see that the most is right in that perimeter. And in that situation, I don't want that stark contrast. But when we're talking about internally, it's okay to see them kind of playing off of each other, right? Because as this hair falls, it's also falling at different angles. And because of the curvature of the head, it's going to fall in a different position. It might fall more centered back versus over to the side, right? So all of those things kind of play into the dimension that's created here and how the hair ends up falling. I hope this is all making sense. If it is, go ahead and just, let us know somehow.
Show some love.
Yeah. Okay, so here we go. You can see there I created that next subsection here.
And Sarah is asking, why not blend with a comb instead of your fingers?
I just find that it's easier to manipulate those colors with my hands. I love to, these are our best tools, I feel like. So you could absolutely, if you wanted to, kind of stretch that through and blend it together with a comb or with another brush. But for me, the best saturation that I get and the best melting that I get is done with my hands and with my fingers. So for that reason, I like to work that way. But again, I think it's always just a preference. So I think everyone, there's no necessarily right or wrong. I think there's just a matter of preference for everyone, and that's it. I know I personally, I've gone to many trainings, and where I've been the trainer and where I've been the trainee, and I feel like I've always enjoyed those trainings more when I have the ability to be a little bit more of an artist and to have a little bit more creative freedom within a technique and within finding that final result. versus somebody saying that it has to be exactly this way and it has to, the sectioning has to fall exactly one way and all this. It's not that that doesn't work. It will work to give you a beautiful result. Obviously, that's why they're teaching it that way. But I just think that we as artists are able to interpret things in our own way to our own artistic eyes. Get a little bit more saturation right there. Okay, here we go there. So remember, we'll kind of double fold this. Love these larger foils for that. And then just a single fold. I like to be able to let it breathe a little bit. So I don't want to close it in completely. That's why I only will fold maybe the one side. That way it can continue to kind of work and oxidize in there.
And can you just share again what the intent of the technique is, what we're looking to achieve today?
Sure, yeah. So really the purpose of this technique is to create a look that is just a little different, something that's unique. It's got a lot of dimension, a lot of different tones that are working through, and finding a way to create harmony between those warm tones and those cool tones. Whereas we're always kind of taught that you either have to go one direction or the other. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that it's great to kind of play with that, challenge the system a little bit in that sense and see what tones really do work together and which tones don't. I think that some of my best formulations that I've ever found or created were usually done by accident, by combining tones that maybe you were told you shouldn't have combined together. But when you did, they created something pretty special.
We have a question, and it is, hey Ricardo, have you tried this technique on naturally curly or textured hair?
I have not yet. Great question, by the way, and I absolutely love working with natural curly textured hair. Obviously, if you saw me when the camera was zoomed out, that's what I'm working with. So I love to work with it myself.
Let me just zoom in for you.
Let's
all.
not get that
There you
close.
go.
That's too close. But that's one of my favorite hair types to work with, and I will say that um, at the end of the day, the hair is a fabric, and if you give different fabrics to a tailor, they can probably still create the same look. It might just fit a little bit differently. So if you try this with a different fabric of hair, you'll still get the same look. It might just fit a little differently. Maybe you just tweak your formulations a little bit or your tones a little bit, but I still think that it works really well for any hair type.
And another question, are there ever times where you have created unwanted warmth in the areas that the tint meets the lightener? If so, how do you correct this?
Yes, I have. And when that happens, I'm glad somebody asked that because I was honestly trying to kind of skirt around it. But when that does happen, it's usually because of an oversaturation. So I found that the best way to correct that is honestly just to make sure that you do what I was doing in that foil. And I'll do it again when I get to this next section, actually. And that's going to be to make sure that you are just lightly connecting those colors together, right? Just don't do it so heavy on the saturation that you do create that what I call like a hot spot. We don't want to create that. What we want to do is create a soft transition. So if you lighten your hand as you're coming in with that base formula and just kind of feather it down, and then you do the same thing with the lightener and you kind of feather it up, they will connect, but they just kind of soften into each other. They'll blur themselves out. But if you're not careful and you go crazy and you really smash them together, you're going to create a not so desirable color, if you get what I'm saying.
So this is a great technique if you can try it on a mannequin or even an extension piece or something that you have that you can practice on.
Yeah, I would highly recommend practicing the merger of those two together before just kind of going straight in on a client. Right? I mean, I would recommend that with any of these colors. Don't just go nuts and play on your client's head. Although I had one of the techniques that I was teaching, and I remember that as I was teaching the technique, literally in almost in stride with me, there was an artist who had a client in her chair who's like, I'm just going to do it right now, and was going step for step with me as I was teaching it. She was executing it, and she sent me pictures afterwards, and it turned out great. So I thought that was amazing. Now, this piece right here, things change a little bit, right? So here you can see we've kind of kept with that same repetition, and you can see the way these tones are already starting to come together, right? You can see how we've got that dimension starting to fill itself in. It's really changing and cooling off, and in some cases enriching the I would say kind of like this orangey tone that we have coming from this mannequin naturally. And you can see how they're going to start kind of playing together. When we get to this section, what we want to do is now we've done two sections here, and we've got essentially two sections here. And there's three, but the top two essentially connect. So we're going to say like two sections here. This needs to be some kind of this is the meat in the middle of the sandwich, if you would. This needs to bring these two buns together. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to layer it in a way that we're doing the same repetition of the slicing and the diagonals, or I'm sorry, the zigzags from the top and from the bottom. So we're going to replicate doing the lightning, and then working them into the center and having a darker center point here. What we're also going to do is we want to make sure that because of the position of the head, right, we're sitting just below the crown. We don't want to create too much lightness up through this top here. So what we want to do is drag that base formula down a little bit lower as we're working through this section, so that we can create a little bit more internal depth um, in this interior section there.
Can you just turn her a little bit so they can see the section from the side as well?
Yeah. Wait, which way? This way?
Yeah.
That way?
Yep.
Okay. So you see where it's sitting there? We know this is going to fall. This is going to fall down, and because of the diagonal coming to the ear, this point right here naturally is going to fall down this way. So this section, with the exception of the very front around the face, might be your most crucial section, because this, when laying flat, is really going to cover all of this. So we want it to really work together with all of that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool.
Is everybody with us? Are you guys on track with Ricardo?
Are we good so far? Australia, y'all better not be sleeping. It's early for you right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give some grace to the U.S. if they're sleeping right now. Okay, so we're going to zigzag that one out.
And we have a question, excuse me, from Jennifer. Jennifer asks, so did you darken the roots and put bleach highlights instead of at the same time?
I'm trying to decipher that.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on.
Oh.
So yes, I think
she's asking,
I'm answering correct. I think I'm answering correctly. Yes, I applied the deeper base formula and putting the highlights in at the same time. So yes, we're doing it all at the same time. This is about trying to work quicker and a little bit more efficient, right?
Time is money.
That's right.
Thumbs up if you agree.
Angela knows. She handles all the books here at the salon, so she reminds me that daily. And it's usually followed by you need to hurry up kind of conversation. So here you can see I'm actually, as I'm starting to put my lightener in, I'm staying a little bit lower to start, because again, I said I'm gonna drag that base formula down a little bit lower than I did with my previous sections. So I don't want to sacrifice saturation through those mids and ends because that's going to give us a little bit more pop. And then as we soften it up, this is going to create that blur as we're going from our more saturated ends into the top. It's very similar to if you were doing a hand-painted balayage, it would be the exact same thing, right? You start a little softer towards the top, and then you end up with a lot more saturation towards the ends, and that's how you get that beautiful gradient in balayage where it goes from um, darker to lighter, and it just continues to get lighter the more saturation and the more product that you're able to work into that hair. So here we'll apply that base. Make sure we're getting good saturation there too on the root. And if you notice, when I'm working that saturation, it's more of a side-to-side motion than a vertical motion. But you see how I haven't connected them yet? I'm staying away from that for now because I really want to just make sure that I've got great saturation at the root. Okay. And then once I've got that, now I feel like I can really start to bring this down a little bit. So the same way that I feathered up, I'm going to feather down. Still maintaining for good saturation, but softening up as I get right into that lightener. And as I get into that lightener, what I like to do too is I'm almost lifting my brush as I work through. It's similar to, let's say if you were doing like a men's haircut and you're doing some clipper work, you don't go in and you stay flat and work that straight up into the hairline, or else you're gonna end up with a very oddly shaped haircut, or you're going to take that fade way too high. You want to create some strokes where you're really kind of pulling it away, and that's going to soften and kind of feather it and blend it out. Right. So the same thing works with the color and the lightener. You just kind of want to stroke it up and down, and then also away from the hair at the same time. So we'll fold this over twice. Again, separating to make sure that those two don't touch inside of the foil. And this one I can probably just leave it like that. I don't feel the need to have to lock over one side because it's sitting flat, not at the diagonal. Now, I've separated this top section that we're also going to be lightening, but I'm going to continue to work in that interior and then work my way back up to the top because it's going to be a lot harder if I put this in now and I'm still trying to get these colors in on the interior as well. So the beauty of it is we just have to do kind of one big zigzag here because the center is all going to be that same low light formula. All right, so we'll come in like this and then connect into that top. And then separate our exterior from our interior like that. See, so here's our interior. We can leave this out over here. And then I've got I'm going to pull that color through. Then I've got my lower interior, or I'm sorry, my lower exterior, my upper exterior right there. See? So with this, again, I'm going to move this one over to the side, just to keep those separated. And now I can work through this pretty quickly.
We have a question, and it seems that you come up with lots of different color formulas. How do you test those formulas?
In my head, for the most part. You know, again, like I said it in the beginning, I really feel like the beauty of, really the beauty of Joico is they give you something that's going to fill every need that you have, right? Whether that's pre-blended color with Lumishine or a true tone color with Vero K-PAK, or all kinds of different lighteners between our Vero system or the Blonde Life system. There's so many different things that they give you, but when we're talking about the true tone colors and we're talking about Vero K-PAK, a lot of the times it's just you just have to. I'll sit there and I'll just stare at a color wheel, and I'll map it out in my head and I'll say, if I combine this with that, do you think that would work? I don't know. And I look at where the combination is going to land me on that color wheel, or I will swatch it out, and like I said, because I do so much melting and a lot of times I'm combining different tones. I know some of my favorite formulas were created when I created my crisscross color melt, which is a color melting technique that melts both vertically this way, but also horizontally around the head. So the colors melting and transitioning from your base formula down, but then also as we're working from the that face frame formula, it gets deeper as it works towards the back, and they all melt together that way as well. And when I was doing that, I was combining colors that maybe I typically wouldn't combine together, and I found these great formulas that came together just from doing that. So I think that in itself, like that was one way. It's just trial and error, experimenting on mannequins or swatches. But most of the time, it's me sitting or standing here and looking at that and figuring it out myself.
Ricardo also likes to try and buy colors that he typically doesn't use in the salon to find a way to use them in the salon.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, then you're customizing to your client and they can't go just anywhere and get what you can do.
Yeah.
We have a question from Sarah. She says, I really love working the back to the front. Do you change your lighter formula as you work your way up?
I don't. I keep my formulas the same as I'm working through, but I might change my placement on them. So in some cases, if I'm working my way up, I will change how far up I'm bringing one formula and how far down I'm bringing the other. But as far as changing the actual formulas themselves, I keep those consistent. But I mean, you can definitely do that if you wanted to, especially if you wanted to create just a different layer of dimension in the hair. I think that would absolutely work.
I have a question.
No.
Will you finish this application?
Probably not.
I'm just checking.
Sorry, I'm like, listen, guys, and if I ever get down to Australia, which I'm hoping that happens, you guys can help me to persuade the powers that be for that. But I think I'm like 2 for 80 as far as like techniques that I've done and the amount of times that I've actually finished them in time on a live.
You've been getting very good at it.
I've been getting better.
Very,
better.
very good.
But this one takes me just a touch more. There's a lot of hand wiping that happens, and that's what it is. Make sure you have a damp towel on hand because you can be wiping your hand a lot, like a lot. Got that there, and here's that other kind of that mid light, right? So now I put the mid, I put the low. I'm going back to the mid. I'm dragging that color down a little bit lower. So if you saw in the last two, kind of kept them around here. So I'm going to take this and bring it down just a touch lower there. Again, going back to the mid. And I feel like when we're talking about color, right, and placement, is it's also visual. Like it's great to be able to play with sectioning and your placement and all that fun stuff, but really at the end of the day, it's really a very visual thing. So you might go in with one plan and a specific kind of expectation, but then as you're working through, I always like to kind of grab the hair and pull it out from the head and see how it's laying down there. And I might change what I'm doing like halfway through because I realize that, well, maybe this person has a different kind of growth pattern, or maybe they have a cowlick in a different place that's influencing the hair to lay more forward versus down or back. And when that happens, you just go with it, right? You just change the plan a little bit. But it doesn't mean that it won't work. How many of you do that? Like, how many people actually step back, step away from the hair, and really see where that hair falls. Like just pull it straight out, take a section, and then just drop it and just see where that goes. Right? Just do that. Because you see how sometimes it falls kind of straight, and then this hair over here falls more off to the side over there. So, you know, maybe it changes where you're putting your foils and you have to over direct yourself one way or the other. So just look at those things. These are the little details that I feel like can make a big difference for your final result and your final outcome. Okay, again, we're starting this a little bit lower.
And Katie is asking, how easy is it to replicate this for a client on their maintenance appointments?
Because the sectioning, again, I'm loving the questions, everyone. I think everyone's asking such phenomenal questions. Because the sectioning is really set, it's pretty easy to replicate. But what I find is that because we are establishing that root formula and we're bringing it so far down, maintenance is minimal. Like you don't have to. This is great for that client that doesn't want to have to come in every 4 to 6 weeks. And if they do, they're maybe just doing it just to get their roots covered up. You know, I always recommend trying to match as closely to someone's natural base as possible. Again, we just want to keep it as low maintenance as possible right now, unless you have somebody who does truly enjoy to be high maintenance. That's okay. But I think in this situation and the way everything is right now, most people just prefer something that's easier to maintain, that they don't have to come in quite as often, so the regrowth is easier to keep up with.
And can you just show from top to bottom the blend of that?
Yes, so we've got our saturation really pretty dense, right? So the base formula is already in there. This is the same base formula that we dragged down. And as we get down to probably about this point here, right, I like to give myself, trying to remember if it's metric or standard over there as far as the measurement system goes, but probably just quite a few centimeters in between or a couple of inches where I've feathered the lightener up and I give myself the appropriate amount of space to then feather the color down. So that way we don't create that harsh transition.
Thank you.
And then again, double fold that. And there's that center section. So right now, up to this point, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 foils in the hair, right? So we're going to jump over to the front. And I've got 7 minutes left, 6 minutes left. So probably not going to get the whole thing done, but maybe we can have at least this front portion done for everyone. So right here, I basically, I'm subdividing this just because I think that what I like to do is come more horizontal in this front section. And then on the around the face, I just like to follow the hairline, the natural hairline. So I'll come this way here, and then I'll come diagonally over here, right? And you can start with whichever one you want. In this case, I'm going to start with the lower portion so that I don't have my foil hanging over and blocking me over here. So we'll take a more fine zigzag there, always wanting to leave some point in there that will cut into that hairline just to break that up so it doesn't feel so solid. Let me drop that back. And then this part too, again, totally up to you. Do you want to have a lot of brightness all the way up, like somewhat money piece there, or do you want to have it live a little bit lower? So I like to over direct forward like this and keep it at that diagonal so that when it falls at a more of an angle versus if I'm here and it creates a harsh line. Right, so I'll keep it this way. And I'm going to elect to keep this a little bit lower because, to be honest with you, I personally am kind of tired with the money pieces everywhere, and I like to see that color live uh, a little lower in the face, and the lightener sitting also a little bit lower.
But if your client wants a major money piece, you
Well, I
give
mean,
them.
obviously, you do what the people want, right? You do what they ask. But I feel like the way things are going now, people are probably going to want to let it sit a little bit lower. Again, just a little less maintenance, right? Okay, so now we get here, and we're just going to soften that in. You notice I turned my brush from kind of going flat with the hair to more of a vertical so that I can create these soft strokes to feather it down. That's it.
And Ricardo, maybe you can talk a second about styling specifically with brunettes. What maybe some of your go-to products are for prepping the hair. Maybe something that is from our Guardians of the Galaxy collection as well.
We have a Guardians of the Galaxy collection.
Guardians of the it's Guardians of something awesome.
Oh, you're talking about the
Did I mix it up with the
thing?
actual
Yes,
movie?
you mixed it up with the movie.
I'm a fan.
Listen, you can't talk Marvel with me. That's a complete
That was
sidetrack
for you.
conversation for me. I will go off the rails if we start talking about Marvel stuff. But yeah, so if we're talking about styling,
Guardians of Glam.
glam,
That's
yes.
what I meant. Sorry.
Different kind of superhero. If we're talking about what kind of stylers are we using for this, I feel like it really depends on the length. For me, I like to, with almost every one of my clients, they all get that same kind of foundation. We start with that Defy Damage Pro Series 1 shampoo, Pro Series 2, and then when we get back to the chair, I detangle them using my Luster Lock Multi Perfector spray, and then I 99% of the time will layer in some Dream Blowout, and sometimes I actually like to spray in some Heat Hero as well, which gives me that extra layer of heat protection and humidity protection, especially here in Florida. We need that. And then I'll do my blow dry. Sometimes I'll see if their hair's looking a little dry or needs some shine, then I'll mix in maybe like a Luster Lock oil or some Blonde Life oil. And then from there, I like to then build up. So if I'm using any kind of hot tools, I'll go back in using Heat Hero, and maybe I'll use like hair shake or something to give me some texture before I iron. And then after I iron, I like to use whichever shake I think is appropriate for the length. So sometimes I'll use body shake, sometimes I use beach shake. And my new favorite product that I use on almost everyone is Rise Up. I use Rise Up on everyone. I spray that stuff around like the way that I would like to see snow in real life, because we don't see snow in Florida. That's how much I use Rise Up. I love to see it everywhere. I think it makes everything better.
So there's something for every purpose and goal of look.
Not to mention, it's great for retailing in the salon. You can get a lot of stuff done. So I'm running out of time, guys. But basically, this is going to be my low light here, and then when we get to this front part right here, what we're going to do is the same thing, just out of horizontal. So you take a zigzag, highlight, and then try to match that to where you're seeing here, and then another zigzag mid light, then low light, dragging that base a little bit further as you work up the head, and then you'll do the same thing here: highlight, mid light, low light. So that's it. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, couldn't get the whole thing done. But I want to say thank you so much to the Sabre Group, to Joico, US and Australia. So excited to be able to do this with all of you. And I'm looking forward to hopefully being able to do more with everyone, maybe in person. So thanks to everyone. Thank you for tuning in. And hopefully I will see everyone in the future.